fifth part of the video series about the budget system of Russia, we will consider the budget process. Any financial year in Russia coincides with the calendar year, that is, it begins on January the 1st and ends on December 31st. State budgets at the federal and regional levels are taken for 3 years in all cases. As a rule, local budgets are also approved for the 3-year period of time. It's established in the Basic Budget Law of the Russian Federation Budget Code. The Budget Code establishes the basic budgetary rules for budgets of all the levels, such as the federal, regional and local, as well as the off-budget funds, both federal and regional ones. Budget laws represent another important element of the budget legislation. Laws on the federal budget, laws on the budget of the federal off-budget funds, the regional laws on the budgets of the constituent entities of the Russian Federation, the regional laws on the budgets of the territory compulsory health insurance funds, and the local laws on the budgets of municipalities are adopted annually. In addition, the regions and municipalities have their own legislation, which establishes rules that are not enshrined in the Budget Code. The Russian legislation does not specify when the work on the budget for a planned year should be started. As a rule, such work begins on February-March of a current year. Financial bodies are responsible for preparing the budget, but the first document from which a new budget planning cycle begins is prepared not by the financial but by the economic bodies. They prepare a forecast of the social and economic development. The main economic indicators are specified in the forecast records for the next 3 years, which will form the basis of the draft budget. In May, the social and economic development forecast is studied by the government and gains the approved status. Everything which has been mentioned before applies to all the levels of budgets, the federal, the regional and local ones. After the approval of the social and economic development forecast, active work on the draft budget starts. The financial authorities develop the basic budget indicators, including the funding amounts of budgetary sectors, and coordinate them with the relevant state and municipal authorities. As a result, a draft budget for the planned period is being prepared. At the same time, off-budget funds prepare and submit their draft budgets to the government. All the projects are considered by the government, and after the approval by the government, they are submitted to the head of the government authority. The head of the government authority sends the signed documents to the legislative body. By October the 1st, the federal government is obliged to provide the State Duma of the Russian Federation, similar to the House of Representatives in the US Congress, with a draft federal budget. The draft budget of the pension fund, the draft budget of the federal compulsory health insurance fund, and the draft budget of the federal social insurance fund. Before November the 1st, heads of regions, governors, must submit the regional budget and the budget of the territory compulsory health insurance fund to the legislative body. And the head of the municipal government authority must submit a draft local budget before November 15th. In this case, the regional authorities can focus on the level of subsidies provided for the regions in the federal budget, and the municipalities can focus on the level of subsidies from the regional budget. Apart from the draft budget, a large package of documents is sent to the legislative body, which includes a revised forecast of the social and economic development, the main ideas of the tax and budget policy, an explanatory note and others. As a rule, a month after submitting the draft budgets, the legislative body studies the draft document in the first reading. However, before the first reading, a preparatory work is arranged in the regions and municipalities. Firstly, public hearings of the draft budgets are mandatory at the regional and local levels. it is understood that there should be a discussion on the draft budget with its citizens. However, in the overwhelming majority of cases, there is no discussion. And public hearings are more like a lecture given to the public by the head of the financial body. Let us note that the public hearings are not held at the federal level. In addition, one more document must be submitted before the first reading, and it is the resolution of the external audit body. The audit body accounting chambers belongs to such organizations, and they report to the legislative bodies. After that, the draft budget is considered by the legislators and adopted in the first reading. At this stage, only the basic parameters of the budget are approved: the amount of revenues, the amount of the expenses, and the budget deficit. When considered in the second reading, these figures are not subject to change. If they need to be corrected, it's necessary to consider the document again starting from the first reading. The creation of a working group of representatives of the executive and legislative authorities to prepare the draft for the second reading is one more result of the first reading of the draft budget. Usually, the second reading of the draft budget in the legislative body takes place a month after the first one. The rapporteur during the second reading is one of the deputies, who is the chairman of the working group responsible for the preparation of the draft for the second reading. During the second hearing, all the budget parameters are established. Sometimes there are the third hearings that clarify some technical issues. Anyway, during the second or third hearings, the draft budget is approved by the legislative body by an overwhelming majority. At the federal level, after the approval of the draft budget by the lower house of the Federal Assembly, the State Duma, the draft bill goes to the upper chamber for approval, the Council of Federation, similar to the US Senate. After it, the adopted document is sent to the highest official, president, governor, or mayor, who signs it, and after publication, the document acquires the status of the law. At this stage, budget planning is completed. The next stage is the execution of the budget. Conventional technologies are used here. However, it's necessary to pay attention to one important fact, that a great number of changes is made to the budget law in the current year. In recent years, an average of 6 changes per year has been made to the laws on the regional budget. That is, amendments to the budget are made every 2 months. Amendments are usually prepared by the executive authorities, while the legislative body approves them. In this case, the procedure is the same as in adopting budget but without a public hearing. This practice takes a lot of working time from employees of the executive and legislative authorities, but also leads to a decrease in the quality of budget planning. Financial institutions have lost the incentive to prepare a high-quality draft budget, because one can always improve the budget laws with amendments. The third and the final stage of the budget cycle is a report on the budget execution. The executive body prepares this report and the legislative body accepts it. As with the adoption of the budget, the head of the executive body sends a report to the legislative body. Reports on local budget must be submitted to the legislative body before May the 1st of the year following the report year. Reports on the execution of the regional budget must be submitted before June the 1st. They must be submitted before August the 1st if we speak about the execution of the federal budget. The external audit body must submit the resolution about the report. At the regional and local levels, public hearings are required. The report is adopted by an overwhelming majority of the deputies. Now we are going to finish the overview of the budget process. You can find the materials here. See you soon.